HOA President Richard Langley thought he could burn Matt Carter's Harley and walk away untouched, hiding behind rules and authority. He expected the cops to look the other way, the neighbors to stay silent. But he forgot one thing: Matt wasn't alone. With just one message, the call went out, and by morning, 500 bikers rolled into town, ready to show that brotherhood is stronger than bureaucracy. But just wait until you hear how Langley's perfect little world collapsed around him, and why now he's nothing more than a ghost of his own neighborhood. Matt Carter had always known that living under an HOA was like being married to a petty dictator. 2 decades in this house, and every year, the rules got dumber, the fees got steeper, and the board got smugger. It started small, no flags, no decorations, not even a wind chime because, according to their ridiculous guidelines, it could be a disturbance to the peace. Matt had rolled his eyes and ignored it, just like he ignored the letter about his grass being a 1/4 inch too high last summer, or the one about his trash cans being visible from the street. But this time they'd gone too damn far. That morning, he found the envelope taped to his door like some passive-aggressive ransom note. HOA violation notice. $500 fine the offense, parking his Harley Davidson in his own damn driveway. Matt let out a bitter chuckle. His garage was full: tools, old car parts, a workbench covered in half-finished projects. The Harley had always been outside, and no one had said a word. But suddenly, out of nowhere, it was a problem? No, this wasn't about rules. This was personal. He knew exactly who was behind it: Richard Langley, HOA president, local tyrant, and a man whose entire existence revolved around making other people miserable. Langley had been gunning for him for years, probably ever since that board meeting when Matt called him a washed-up mall cop in a golf cart. Yeah, that probably hadn't helped. Matt stared at the fine, then at his bike, sleek black and chrome, polished to perfection. This wasn't just a motorcycle. It was freedom, rebellion, the open road. It was his father's bike, the one they'd rebuilt together when Matt was 17. His old man had always said, "A man's gotta have something to fight for, Matty. Something they can't take from you." This Harley was that something. Matt ran his fingers over the gas tank, feeling the smooth metal beneath his calloused hands. Screw 'em. He crumpled the letter and tossed it onto the workbench. Let Langley huff and puff all he wanted. The bike was staying right where it was. That night, Matt was jolted awake by something primal, something wrong, a deep, gut-wrenching boom that sent every nerve in his body into overdrive. Boom. The house shook. The air smelled wrong, thick and acrid like burning oil and rubber. Matt bolted upright. Then he saw it. Through his bedroom window, a violent orange glow lit up the night. No, no, no. He ran, barefoot, shirtless, barely registering the bite of the cold pavement as he burst out the front door. His Harley was on fire. Flames clawed at the sky, turning the chrome into molten rivers, eating away at the black leather seat. The bike wasn't just burning. It was screaming, metal warping and twisting like it was alive, like it was in agony. The heat slammed into Matt's face, hot enough to sting his skin, but he didn't care. He took a step forward, pure instinct telling him to do something. But there was nothing left to save. The fire had already spread to the lawn, licking at the edges of his driveway. And then, through the hellish glow, he saw him. Standing at the end of the cul-de-sac, arms folded, was Richard Langley. Matt's stomach plummeted. The bastard wasn't even trying to hide it. Langley stood there, bathed in the flickering orange light, a smug little smirk on his face, like he was admiring his handiwork. Like this was funny to him. Matt's fists clenched so hard, his knuckles cracked. For a split second he saw red, saw himself storming across the street, grabbing Langley by that stupid HOA-branded polo and putting him through a damn mailbox. But something held him back. Maybe it was the realization that this wasn't over. Maybe it was the sick, coiling rage in his gut telling him to wait. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't some random fire. This was a message. And if Langley thought Matt was just going to take it and roll over like some scared homeowner, he had no idea what was coming. The fire department might as well have been responding to a cat in a tree for all the urgency they showed. By the time they actually got their hoses set up, the flames had done their job. There wasn't even a fire left to fight, just the smoldering corpse of what used to be Matt's Harley. He stood there, barely feeling the heat on his face, barely registering the water turning to steam as the firefighters doused the blackened remains. The air was thick with the acrid stench of melted rubber, scorched metal, and something worse, something personal. He could still see it, still hear the roar of the flames devouring everything that Bike had meant to him. It wasn't just a machine. It was his father's hands guiding his, teaching him how to fix a carburetor when he was just a kid. It was long road trips down the California coast, the wind in his hair, his old man's voice yelling over the engine, "Feel that, Matty? That's freedom." It was the one thing, the one damn thing he had left that connected him to the man who raised him, and now it was nothing. Gone. A firefighter clapped a hand on his shoulder, snapping him back into the present. "Sorry, man," the guy muttered. Matt didn't answer. His throat felt like it was full of ash. The police showed up 10 minutes later, strolling in like this was some minor inconvenience in their night. 2 officers, one older, one younger, both radiating that special kind of disinterest reserved for people who already had 100 better things to do. The older one, a stocky guy with a beer gut stretching his uniform, gave the scene a single glance before letting out a long sigh. "Looks like an accidental fire." Matt blinked. Did he just... A what? His voice came out sharp, barely controlled. The cop shrugged, already scribbling in his notepad like the case was closed. "Could have been electrical, maybe a fuel leak. Bikes go up real fast when there's gas involved." Matt clenched his jaw so hard it ached. "That's complete bullshit." The cop sighed, like he really didn't want to be here. "Do you have any proof it was arson?" Proof. Matt felt something heavy coil in his gut, something black and seething. He didn't need proof. He didn't need an investigation. He knew, and the proof was standing right there, Richard Langley. The bastard wasn't even pretending to be upset. He was standing on the sidewalk, arms folded over his chest, smirking. Not openly, not enough for the cops to notice, but Matt saw it. He saw the little glint of satisfaction in Langley's beady eyes, saw the way his polished shoes were planted firmly on the pavement, so far from the fire that there wasn't a speck of soot on him. Too clean. Too perfect. Matt had seen Langley look more disheveled after HOA meetings. That son of a bitch did this. "Such a shame, Carter," Langley said, shaking his head like he actually gave a damn. "Real tragedy." His eyes flicked to the wreckage, then back to Matt, his lips twitching like he was holding back a grin. "But, you know, HOA rules are rules. That thing shouldn't have been in the driveway anyway." Matt's blood went ice cold, the sheer audacity of it. The smug little game Langley was playing. His fingers curled into fists at his sides, nails digging into his palms so hard he thought they might break skin. "You did this," he growled, voice low and dangerous. Langley's smirk widened by a fraction. He leaned in slightly, dropping his voice so only Matt could hear. "Prove it." Matt's breath came out slow and ragged, like a wolf about to pounce. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to do something, to grab Langley by his perfectly pressed polo and put him through the nearest mailbox. But that's exactly what Langley wanted. He wanted a reaction, wanted Matt to lose his cool, throw a punch, give him a reason to slap a lawsuit or an assault charge on him. Matt forced himself to breathe, forcing the rage down, shoving it somewhere deep, somewhere it could simmer and burn just like his Harley had. The cops didn't care. They handed him a half-assed report that wouldn't go anywhere. There wouldn't be an investigation. The insurance company would laugh in his face. No suspect, no payout. And Langley? He walked away whistling, like this was just another successful HOA dispute. Matt stood there alone, in the wreckage of his past, until he made a call. Matt Carter wasn't just some guy with a bike. The HOA, Langley, the clueless cops. None of them understood what a Harley really meant. They saw it as a machine, a noisy inconvenience parked in a driveway, just another thing to regulate and fine. But for Matt, and for men like him, a Harley was more than metal and rubber. It was freedom. It was the wind in your face at 80 miles an hour, the open road stretching out before you like a promise. It was nights spent in roadside bars, swapping stories with men who had grease-stained hands and 1,000 miles behind them since yesterday morning. It was a brotherhood, forged not by blood, but by asphalt and chrome. And now, that brotherhood was about to come calling. He sat on the edge of what used to be his bike, the blackened skeleton of its frame still warm under his fingertips. The scent of burnt rubber clung to the air, thick and acrid. The rage had settled now, not gone, just cold, sharpened into something dangerous. Matt pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the screen for half a second before he started typing. He didn't need a long explanation, didn't need to beg, plead, or justify. All it took was 7 words. "They burned my Harley. Need backup." He hit send. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The quiet of the cul-de-sac stretched out, broken only by the occasional distant howl of a coyote. Somewhere down the street, a porch light flickered on. Someone's nosy neighbor, probably checking to see if the troublemaker was still sulking over his accident. Matt barely noticed. He just sat there, staring at his screen, watching the message sit in his group chat like a lit fuse waiting to blow. Then the first reply came. "On my way. Hold tight." Then another. "Texas boys riding out. Give us 8 hours." Then another. "Nevada's rolling. See you at sunrise." And then it was a flood. One by one, they answered the call. Men from California, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, even a couple from Colorado. Some of them owed Matt favors. Some of them didn't need a reason, because that was the code. You didn't let a brother stand alone. By the time the last reply rolled in, Matt felt something shift in his chest. The weight of loss still sat there, heavy and bitter. But now there was something else, too. Something that felt a hell of a lot like justice. He didn't bother going inside that night. There was no point. Instead, he grabbed a lawn chair from his garage, cracked open a beer, and sat there in the cool night air, waiting. And when the sun rose the next morning, he heard them before he saw them. The first rumble hit the pavement like distant thunder, rolling through the silent suburban streets. Then another, and another. Then it wasn't just 1 or 2 engines. It was dozens. A wall of sound, raw and untamed, shattered the pristine peace of Langley's perfect little neighborhood. Engines roared, tires crunched against pavement, and then they came into view. Bikers, hundreds of them, leather-clad, tattooed, eyes hidden behind dark shades. Men with years of road behind them. Men who had fought, bled, and burned for their own sense of justice. The kind of men who didn't forget a wrong done to one of their own. Matt stood up, a slow grin spreading across his face as the first bike rolled to a stop in front of him. The rider pulled off his helmet, revealing a face lined with road dust and experience. "Damn shame about the Harley," the man said, swinging off his bike. Matt nodded. "Yeah, but I figure we can do something about it." The man's grin widened. "Oh, I got some ideas." And behind him, 500 engines growled in agreement. At first, it was just a few bikes rolling in slow and steady, engines purring like distant thunder. A handful of leather-clad men, their faces weathered by the road, pulling up to Matt's house in 2s and 3s. They parked along the curb, boots hitting the pavement, nodding at each other in silent understanding. Then, as the morning stretched on, more came. 12, 24, then dozens more. By the time the sun climbed to its peak, the street was gone, swallowed whole by a wave of bikers, 500 strong, a force of chrome and leather, filling the cul-de-sac and spilling onto every pristine, HOA-approved lawn in sight. The deep growl of idling Harleys shook the carefully manicured hedges, rattled the overpriced security cameras mounted on garage doors. Boots thudded against the pavement as men dismounted, some leaning casually against their bikes, others stepping onto the bright green HOA-mandated perfect grass like they owned the place. And in a way, they did. Neighbors peeked through their feast with their curtains, jaws slack, hands gripping their phones, no doubt debating whether to call the cops or just hide under their beds. Some of them stood frozen on their porches, clutching their morning coffee like it was the last lifeline to normalcy they had left. And the HOA board, they were losing their damn minds. Mrs. Calloway, the HOA treasurer, had backed herself against her front door, her face pale as a sheet. Mr. Franklin, the vice president, stood on his driveway, mouth moving soundlessly, as he watched a biker in a skull-patterned bandana casually light a cigarette on his porch. But the best part, Richard Langley, the smug, untouchable king of the HOA, stood frozen in the middle of the sidewalk, gripping a styrofoam cup of coffee so tight his knuckles had gone white. His perfectly pressed polo clung to his back with sweat, and for once, he wasn't smirking. No. For the first time in years, Langley looked scared. His eyes darted from biker to biker, to the rows of black vests, leather jackets, and tattooed arms, to the sheer mass of men standing shoulder to shoulder, completely owning his once peaceful suburban kingdom. He swallowed hard. Then, voice tight and cracking, he finally forced out, "What the hell is this?" Matt Carter stepped forward. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't even angry anymore. No, this was something different, something calm, and that made it so much worse. "This," Matt said, gesturing to the army of bikers standing behind him, "is a homeowners meeting." Langley's eye twitched. "Oh, what?" Matt cut him off. "I figured since you're so passionate about community involvement, you'd appreciate some new voices in the neighborhood." The men behind him chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that made Langley flinch like he just walked into a cage full of wolves. I'll call the police," Langley sputtered, voice higher now, thinner. "This is trespassing, intimidation." Matt tilted his head. "You could call the cops." He turned slightly, glancing at the bikers behind him. But I think they're a little busy right now." Langley blinked. Then he heard it. A chuckle, not from Matt, from the group. And then it hit him. A few bikers were leaning against the squad cars parked at the end of the street. The same cops he was about to call? They were already here, not standing at the ready, not reaching for handcuffs, just talking, laughing. Because the thing about bikers, they weren't just outlaws. Some were veterans. Some were business owners. Some were cops themselves. Langley's face lost the last bit of color it had. His entire world, his HOA kingdom, his power, his control, was slipping through his fingers, and he couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Matt stepped forward, lowering his voice so only Langley could hear. "You thought you could burn my bike and get away with it?" Langley opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "You thought you could send me a bill for my own property, take away the one thing my father left me, and I'd just take it?" Langley swallowed so hard Matt could hear it. "I let you have your fun, Richard," Matt murmured, voice steady. "But now, it's my turn." Behind him, 500 bikers smiled. The HOA board had never moved so fast in their lives. Panicked hands fumbled with phones, dialing 911 like their very existence depended on it. "This is an emergency!" Mrs. Calloway shrieked into her phone, eyes wild as she pressed herself against her pristine white door. There are bikers everywhere!" Mr. Franklin, still clutching his coffee like it was a life raft, practically begged into his own phone. "Send backup! Send everyone! They're taking over the neighborhood!" Langley, standing dead center in his own personal nightmare, was frozen in place, his jaw working but no words coming out. His suburbia, his perfect little world, had been swallowed whole by leather and chrome, and he had no control over it. The sound of sirens finally cut through the chaos, but it was already too late. Because the moment the cops arrived, they didn't find a riot. They didn't find a crime scene. They found bikers everywhere, and they found them leaning against squad cars like they belonged there. A few of them had arms draped over officers' shoulders, grinning like old friends catching up over a beer. Another was shaking hands with a cop like they were sealing a damn business deal, because some of them were old friends. Matt stood with his hands in his pockets, watching Langley's face morph from rage to confusion to something dangerously close to fear. "Afternoon, officer," he said as a patrolman stepped toward him. "Beautiful day, huh?" The cop, a middle-aged guy with graying hair and mirrored sunglasses, tilted his head. "Sure is, Carter. Heard about what happened to your bike. Damn shame." Matt nodded. "Yeah, real damn shame," Langley snapped. "They're trespassing," he spat, his face a deep, splotchy red. He pointed a shaking finger at the sea of black vests and roaring bikes. "They're intimidating residents. This is a hostile takeover." The cop turned his head slightly, taking in the hundreds of bikers casually posted up on the HOA's precious, rule-abiding street. He took his time with it, gaze slowly sweeping over the neighborhood like he was considering the claim. One of the bikers, a tall guy with a thick beard and a smirk that practically oozed confidence, pushed off from the hood of a patrol car. "We're residents too, buddy," he drawled, adjusting the cut of his leather vest. "Just here to admire the fine work the HOA's been doing." A ripple of low chuckles spread through the crowd. Langley's face twitched. This wasn't supposed to happen. The police were his weapon, his enforcers. When he called, they were supposed to handle the problem, remove the problem. But now, the problem wasn't going anywhere. And worse, the police weren't doing a damn thing about it. Langley's mask of control cracked. He saw it now, clear as day. He wasn't the one in power anymore. Langley had spent years running this neighborhood like his own personal kingdom, issuing fines, making up rules on a whim, and lording over homeowners like some self-appointed tyrant. He'd crushed anyone who dared challenge him, always with that smug little smirk and a stack of paperwork, proving he was technically within his rights. He thought he was untouchable. But the thing about power, it only works if people are too scared to push back. And Matt Carter had just flipped the whole damn script. A few bikers had been filming the whole thing from the moment they rolled in, not just the gathering, everything. The burned-out shell of Matt's Harley, the police standing around doing nothing, the panic in Langley's beady little eyes when he realized he'd lost control. And now that footage was everywhere. By mid-afternoon, clips were already hitting social media. A slow trickle at first, some TikTok videos, a few Reddit threads, a post on a local Facebook group. Then it exploded. #HOA fire scandal was trending. At first, it was just locals piling on, people who had been fed up with the HOA's nonsense for years. Then the biker community got wind of it. Then the internet got wind of it. Someone dug up old HOA complaints. Someone else found news stories from other neighborhoods Langley had terrorized. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for this moment, a woman from 2 streets over posted a doorbell cam video of Langley himself, sneaking out of his house the night before the fire with a gas can in his hand. That was it. That was the kill shot. By evening, it wasn't just social media talking. The local news had picked it up, then state news, then national news. HOA president accused of targeting veteran homeowner. Suburban bikers fight back against HOA corruption. Caught on camera? Was this arson? Langley had built his reputation on control, on being the guy who always had the upper hand. But now, his carefully constructed empire was crumbling around him, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do to stop it. By the time the emergency HOA meeting was called that night, the board members were in full-on survival mode. Calloway and Franklin were practically sweating through their clothes, their eyes darting around the packed community center like they were trapped in a burning building. They weren't defending Langley anymore. They were distancing themselves as fast as humanly possible. And Langley? Langley looked small. The man who had once towered over these meetings, dictating every aspect of people's lives with that smug little smirk, now sat, hunched in his chair, sweat beading on his forehead, his polo collar slightly askew. He was desperate, and everyone in the room could smell it. "It was all a misunderstanding," he stammered, his voice thinner than usual. "No one meant for this to happen." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Not agreement, not support. Just cold, simmering rage. Matt sat forward in his chair, resting his elbows on the table. His face was calm, his voice even. "You sure?" he asked, tilting his head, because it looked pretty intentional from where I was standing. Langley opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg, but no one cared anymore. The vote was unanimous. Langley was out. And as he stumbled out of the meeting, his empire reduced to ashes, Matt Carter sat back in his chair and smiled. The HOA was in shambles. Their once pristine little empire, built on fines, intimidation, and bureaucratic bullshit, had crumbled in the span of 2 days. The board had dissolved faster than a sugar cube in hot coffee. The HOA website? Gone. Their carefully crafted rules and regulations? Irrelevant. And Richard Langley? Let's just say he wasn't seen in the neighborhood after that vote. Some said he packed up and left town. Others swore they saw a moving truck outside his house before dawn, like he was escaping under the cover of darkness. Matt didn't care. The bastard was gone. That's all that mattered. But even with the HOA in ruins, there was still the wreckage of his own life to deal with. His garage was a mess. The fire hadn't reached it, but the heat had warped the paint on his door, and the smoke had seeped into everything. And the Harley? There was no saving it. Matt had spent a full hour in his driveway, just staring at the blackened skeleton of his bike, trying to accept that it was really gone. Not just a machine, not just metal and rubber, his father's bike, his history, his freedom. But then, just like they always did, his brothers came through. The news about Langley had spread fast, but the news about Matt's loss, that spread even faster. The biker community had seen what happened. They'd watched the videos, read the posts, heard the stories. And bikers, they don't forget. Within hours, messages started rolling in. "Let me know what you need, brother. I got some parts if you want to rebuild. Screw it. Let's get him a new one." Then came the donations. Small ones at first. $20 here, 50 there, then 100, then 500, then thousands. A local dealership caught wind of the story and made an offer Matt couldn't refuse. A brand new Harley at the cost. No markup, no bullshit. Just the bike. And then, one night, under the stars, in front of a roaring bonfire, they unveiled it. The fire crackled, sending embers swirling into the cool night air as the tarp was pulled away. Black and chrome, sleek, powerful, but the gas tank, that was special. Custom-etched flames curled up the sides, licking toward the handlebars, polished so smooth they caught the light like real fire. Matt stepped forward, his throat tightening. He ran his fingers over the handlebars, feeling the cool metal beneath his touch. This wasn't just a bike. This was proof. Proof that when you mess with one biker, you mess with all of them. The HOA never fully recovered. In the days following Langley's downfall, there was panic, meetings held behind closed doors, desperate attempts to salvage their reputation. But the damage was done. No one in the neighborhood respected the HOA anymore. Their illusion of power had been shattered, and no amount of emergency meetings or policy revisions could glue it back together. The homeowners, the same ones who had once grumbled under their breath about the HOA but never dared to fight back, suddenly found their voices. They questioned every fine, pushed back on every ridiculous rule. The board members, once feared as the enforcers of order, were now glorified paper pushers, scrambling to keep what little control they had left. The new board was elected within weeks, and let's just say it was a hell of a lot more lenient than the last one. The nitpicky fines, slashed. The rule about flags, gone. The nonsense about wind chimes being a disturbance, erased. And the rule about motorcycles and driveways, never mentioned again. No one even dared. Matt had won, not just for himself, but for every single person who had ever felt trapped under the thumb of the HOA's iron grip. And he didn't need a speech to make that clear. He had one final statement to make, and he made it the only way he knew how. On a cool, crisp Saturday morning, as the sun cast long shadows across the pavement, Matt wheeled his brand new Harley out of the garage, black and chrome, custom-etched flames licking up the sides of the gas tank. A phoenix rising from the ashes. He swung his leg over the seat, rolling his shoulders, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. Then, with a slow glance over his shoulder, he looked at them. His brothers. His army. 500 riders lined up behind him, engines idling low, the sound a deep, rhythmic growl that made the pavement tremble beneath their boots. The morning air was thick with the scent of leather, oil, and something unspoken. Justice. Some had come from out of state just to be here. Some had dropped everything the moment they heard what had happened, and some had never even met Matt before. They just knew what it meant when a brother called for help. This wasn't just a ride, this was a reckoning. Matt reached for the throttle and gave it a single sharp twist, a signal. And just like that, the roar began. One engine, then another, then dozens, then hundreds. The sound exploded through the neighborhood, rolling like a thunderstorm, shaking windows, rattling the carefully constructed suburban illusion these people had spent years protecting. Curtains snapped shut, doors locked. Neighbors who had once gossiped about Matt, the ones who whispered about him being a troublemaker, a nuisance, a problem, now cowered behind their blinds, peeking out at the unstoppable force rumbling past their driveways. The new HOA board members, they stood silent on their porches, watching, eyes wide, knowing damn well that this was their warning. This is what happens when you push the wrong man too far. And Langley? Well, he was gone. Word around town was that he packed up and left in the middle of the night, selling his house for a loss, leaving behind nothing but bad memories and a legacy of failure. Some said he moved out of state. Some said he changed his name. Matt didn't care. Langley was nobody now. And Matt, he rode slowly down the street, his street, leading the convoy of 500 strong right through the heart of the neighborhood they had once tried to control. Engines roared, windows shook. And Matt, he smiled, because sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes on two wheels.